Thank you very much. Last winter, during an official visit by the Danish Prime Minister to Washington, the American president was so kind to tell the Danes that we were a country that punched above our weight. Now, that may be true in certain very specific instances, but it's certainly not true in general. I will argue that Denmark and the Nordic countries in general have a tendency to punch below their weight. They think that they are smaller than they actually are. They forget that their GDPs taken together can match that of Russia. They forget that they, taken together, have air forces that exceed the French Air Force and exceed Royal Air Force, the British. They forget that taken together we have the largest merchant fleet in the world. Taken together we give more development aid than any other country in the world. And we are doing pretty well in sports, in books, in films, in food, fashion, and a lot of other areas. Just think of the Nordic Cool exhibition at the Kennedy Center in Washington a couple of years ago. A couple of weeks ago, I met the Danish leader of the Basic Research Foundation, Liselotte Højgaard. She said to me, and I didn't ask her about it, but voluntarily she said to me, I have the experience when it comes to research in Europe that every time the 3 Nordic members of the EU have coordinated their wishes, their ambitions, they always have their way. And she's been in that business for 10 years, and there's no exception to that. If we are well prepared, if we talk to each other, we can also decide the direction, as we have done in so many fields in the EU. In the World Bank, we have found out how to pool our forces. There's one minister representing all 5 Nordic countries. And when I was Minister for Development in 2004, in the autumn, it was Denmark's turn. And we sat at a big table, and Gordon Brown talked a lot, and I thought a little too much. And so I said, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that I represent the largest budget at this table. The Nordic countries taken together were the largest at this table. I know that Mr. Uffe Andreasen had told you about the successes in UNESCO. If the Nordic countries, and they coordinate, they have coordinating meetings in the mornings. When they do that, and as a result of that, they really have some influence. And when I was Minister for Education, and therefore also UNESCO Minister, we even managed to make sure that the Secretary General, Mr. Ambo, was fired. That was a Nordic idea, that we needed a new Secretary General, and we got our way. He didn't like it, but we got our way. And that was very necessary because he was corrupt. I think that practice could be developed in many other areas. In the Nordic Council, in which I'm in the Presidium, and for half a year I was president of the Nordic Council and have a chance to become president again in 2016. There we have now started new areas of cooperation, and to everybody's surprise, we are now cooperating in defense. That is something new. During the whole Cold War, we couldn't even talk about defense. We couldn't talk about foreign policy. Finland had its special balance to keep, and therefore Sweden didn't want to talk about those matters either. And if someone did, they were certainly corrected immediately. Now there's an open door for discussions about defense. We started 1.5 years ago common surveillance over the Icelandic air territory that had been violated so many times by Russian airplanes. And obviously, that cooperation could be extended to more of the North Atlantic and to the Arctic area, which is so important in the future, not only because there's a risk that militarily it will be an empty room that somebody would like to fill out, but also because there will be much more traffic, cruise traffic, trade traffic, and also development of resources and all the risks that is involved in that. And Denmark and Greenland, as far as I can see, have no chance of doing that surveillance ourselves. No chance. But it's obvious that the Nordic countries together could do a lot better job in the North Atlantic and in the Arctic area. There was a report to the Danish government and parliament about how we take care of the Greenland air territory. It was a very, very critical report. The Greenland Prime Minister asked for a common Nordic drone squadron, and some laughed at that proposal, but in the future, in fact, it is quite relevant also to look at that possibility. And for Greenlanders, it's probably a lot more attractive to have a Nordic cooperation about this than just to be part of the Danish kingdom. The WHO has its European headquarters very close to here. I visited them, and Mrs. Susanna Jakob and her people said, why don't the Nordics cooperate anymore? We need their Nordic voice in WHO. And she talked about the lack of medicines because of resistance. That's a big problem, that penicillin cannot be developed and developed and developed, and more people get immune, and particularly more and more animals get immune, and we have to have a strategy. And now, at the Nordic level, a former Swedish minister, Bo Könberg, he has given us 13 proposals for a Nordic health cooperation, where we can have a common voice and also a common policy when it comes to clinical trials, when it comes to more choice for patients, when it comes to division of labor, when it comes to rare diseases, and in general, division of labor and better register of sicknesses and effects of various ways of dealing with sicknesses. We know in Denmark, we are debating that today in Parliament, that the Swedes in some kinds of cancer have better results than the Danes, but we don't really know why. because the register, the way it's registered, is not really coordinated. So the Danish Cancer Organization is very eager that we have Nordic cooperation when it comes to register of cancer and how it is dealt with. This is just to give you a lot of examples of the potential there is for Nordic cooperation. And I could have added Nordic and Baltic cooperation, because in many of these areas it's obvious that we also have, so to speak, a wider Nordic-Baltic community and meetings involving more than just Nordic countries. And I can assure those who are here representing the Baltic countries that we, in the 5 Nordic countries, we are very open to any wish they might have for further cooperation. If all the Nordic countries came into the EU, and not only 3 of us, if we all were in the EU, then we, together with the Baltic countries, would have votes in the Ministerial Council close to the number of votes that Germany has, with 3 times as many citizens. Again, we are punching below our weight by not using that power, and we are so welcome to use it. Nobody will blame us for it. My final remark is about the Balkans. I visited Belgrade, and met with the chairmanship of the Belgrade Parliament, the Serbian Parliament, and the Deputy President, Mrs. Komic. She said to me, and I'll never forget that, we in the Balkans, we are hypnotized by our differences. We always concentrate on our differences. You in the North, you have learned to use your similarities. Everything that you have in common, that makes you strong, and we should learn to do the same. We in the Balkan countries. We often have visitors, for people who would like to know how independent countries can cooperate the way we do with the common parliament, etc. And why do we need that when we have the EU? Well, there's a very good reason why we need it, even though we have the EU. First of all, we are not all members of the EU. Secondly, we are so much alike that we can very often cooperate deeper than the whole EU. And if we are quick, if we are at our toes, then if we start something within the health area, for instance, it is very, very likely that our model will then be taken over by the entire EU. There are so many examples of this. So therefore, let us stop punching below our weight. Let us pool our forces. There are so many areas where we can do this. Thank you.